Country music has always had a soft spot for the underdog. The broke dreamer, the heartbroken wanderer, the small-town voice nobody expected to hear on the radio. But sometimes, a song arrives that stops everything, grabs the top of the charts, and then disappears almost as fast as it showed up, taking the artist right along with it. Today, we're tracking down 15 of those moments. 15 songs that hit country radio like a thunderclap, made a name overnight, and then went completely quiet. Some of these will bring you right back to exactly where you were the first time you heard them. Number 15, Jeannie C. Riley, Harper Valley PTA, 1968.
Well, the note said, Mrs. Johnson, you're...
Few country songs have ever hit with a kind of instant cultural force that this one did. It wasn't just a hit, it was an event. Jeannie C. Riley was a secretary working in Nashville, answering phones and dreaming of something more, when songwriter Tom T. Hall handed her a song that nobody else wanted to record. The story went, a widowed mother stands up in front of her small-town school board and calls out their hypocrisy one by one, name by name. It was sharp, funny, and just a little bit dangerous. Exactly the kind of song country radio usually shied away from. They recorded it quickly at a studio on Music Row. The session was tight, the budget was small, and Riley's vocal delivery, cool, confident, laced with a smile, gave the whole thing an edge that felt completely unlike the polished Nashville sound of the moment.
The Harper Valley PTA.
Released in the summer of 1968, Harper Valley PTA shot to #1 on the country charts within weeks. Then it crossed over and hit #1 on the pop charts too, making Riley only the second female country artist in history to top both charts simultaneously with the same song. It sold over 1 million copies almost immediately. The story should have launched a long career. It didn't. Follow-up singles came and went without catching fire. The moment, it turned out, was bigger than the career it was supposed to build. By the early 70s, Riley had largely stepped away from mainstream recording. The song eventually became a television movie and a short-lived TV series, but none of it brought back that original lightning strike. A Harper Valley PTA remains one of the great country recordings of its era, a perfectly aimed dart that flew straight and true, exactly once. Number 14, Sammi Smith, Help Me Make It Through the Night, 1971.
Shake it loose and let it fall.
This one didn't announce itself. It crept in slow, wrapped in cigarette smoke and late-night quiet, and by the time you noticed it, it had already gotten under your skin. Sammi Smith had been kicking around Nashville for years before Kris Kristofferson handed her this song. Kristofferson was still more known as a janitor at Columbia Recording Studios than as a songwriter at that point, slipping demos under doors and hoping someone would listen. Smith listened. She heard something in the lyric that felt uncomfortably honest. Not a love song exactly, more like a confession, a request, an admission of just how lonely a night could get. The recording was done at Columbia's Nashville studio, produced by Jerry Bradley. Smith's voice had a roughness to it, a lived-in quality that most country producers at the time tried to sand down and polish away. Bradley left it alone. That was the right call.
Come and lay down by my side.
When the single landed on radio in early 1971, country audiences responded immediately. It climbed to #1 and held there. Then, like Harper Valley PTA before it, it crossed over to the pop charts and kept climbing. Smith won the Grammy for Best Female Country Vocal Performance. She was suddenly one of the most talked about names in Nashville, and then the momentum stalled. Subsequent releases failed to generate the same heat. The sound that had made her unique somehow became harder to replicate on command. She continued recording through the decade, earning deep respect among musicians and songwriters. But the charts never came calling again with that same urgency. Help Me Make It Through the Night is the kind of song that makes you forget you've heard it 100 times. Every time feels like the first. Number 13, Billy Swan, I Can Help, 1974.
Need a hand, I can assure you this, I can help.
It starts with that organ. Just a few notes, rolling in easy and loose, like someone warming up before a gig. Then the rhythm kicks in, and before you know it, you're nodding along to one of the catchiest things country music produced. all decade. Billy Swan had been around the music business long enough to know how it worked and how unfair it could be. He'd been a session player, a studio hand, a songwriter. He wrote Lover Please, which became a modest hit for Clyde McPhatter back in the early 60s, but his own performing career had never caught fire. I Can Help changed that, at least briefly. Swan wrote the song himself, built it around a rockabilly groove that felt both vintage and completely of its moment. Recorded at Monument Records' studio in Nashville, the track was stripped down and punchy. No orchestral strings, no Nashville gloss. Just organ, guitar, bass, drums, and a vocal delivery that sounded genuinely delighted to be there. The song hit #1 on both the country and pop charts in the fall of 1974, which made Swan one of the rare artists of that era to score a crossover #1 on his very first major release. Monument pushed out a follow-up album quickly. Singles followed. None of them caught the same breeze. Swan continued working as a musician and session player through the years, and he toured occasionally, but that particular combination of song, sound, and timing never lined up again the way it did in 1974. I Can Help sounds like it was designed to make you feel better. On that count, it still works perfectly. Number 12, Jim Stafford. Ah, Spiders and Snakes, 1974. This wasn't country in the traditional sense. It wasn't pop either. It was something in between, a novelty record with actual wit behind it, a comic yarn told over a bouncing acoustic groove that nobody could quite pigeonhole and everybody wanted to hear. Jim Stafford was a Florida kid who'd spent years honing his stage act into the clubs and coffee houses, developing a gift for comedy, timing, and instrumental skill. He'd actually played in a band with Kent Lavoie early on, who would later become Lobo. But Stafford's own path to recognition took longer.
Wound up down by the swimming hole.
Spiders and Snakes was the breakthrough. Written with David Bellamy, yes, from the Bellamy brothers, the song told the story of a boy trying to impress a girl who wasn't impressed by much. It was funny, charming, and just self-aware enough to work on multiple levels. Stafford recorded it with producer Phil Gernhardt in a relaxed, almost casual atmosphere that kept the storytelling front and center. Like released in late 1973, it climbed well into 1974, peaking at #3 on the pop charts and doing strong business on the countryside as well. Stafford followed it with My Girl Bill and a handful of other novelty-leaning singles that charted with varying degrees of success, but he never landed another Spiders and Snakes. He went on to host a television variety show for a season, and he remained a popular live performer for decades, building a long-running show in Branson, Missouri. But as far as the charts were concerned, he was in and out in the span of about 18 months. The song, though, stuck around long after he left. Number 11, C.W. McCall, Convoy, 1975. A lot of things had to line up just right for this one to work, and somehow, improbably, they all did. L.I.W. McCall was actually Bill Fries, an advertising executive from Omaha, who created the character as part of a series of commercials for a regional bread company. The character caught on. Fries leaned in. And, after a couple of minor trucking-themed singles, he recorded the song that turned an advertising gimmick into a genuine cultural moment. Convoy tapped directly into the CB radio craze sweeping America in the mid-70s. Truckers had their own language, their own culture, and suddenly everyone wanted in. The song was essentially a story told in CB slang, following a massive convoy of 18-wheelers rolling through the country in loose protest of the 55-mile-per-hour speed limit. It was funny, rhythmic, and oddly rousing. Recorded at a studio in Nashville and produced by Chip Davis, who would later create the Mannheim Steamroller phenomenon. Convoy was built around a half-sung, half-spoken vocal style that suited the character perfectly. It crossed over to #1 on both the country and pop charts in late 1975 and early 1976, becoming one of the biggest novelty hits of the decade. A film followed in 1978, directed by Sam Peckinpah. More singles followed, but the CB craze cooled as quickly as it had heated up, and without that cultural wave beneath him, Freeze had nowhere to go. He eventually returned to his life in Ouray, Colorado, where he served as mayor and left the music business mostly behind. Convoy remains a time capsule of a very specific American moment, loud, funny, and impossible to forget. Number 10, David Frizzell, I'm Gonna Hire a Wino to Decorate Our Home, 1982. The title alone told you everything you needed to know about what kind of song this was going to be. David Frizzell came from good stock. He was the younger brother of Lefty Frizzell, one of the most influential honky-tonk singers who ever lived. That lineage gave David credibility in Nashville, but it also cast a long shadow. He spent years trying to step out from under it, recording duets with Shelley West that earned him some recognition, but nothing that felt entirely his own. Then along came this song. Written by Dwayne Blackwell, it was a comic portrait of a husband whose wife has turned their home into a fancy showplace, while all he wants is a place that feels like the bar where he used to spend his evenings. Rather than argue, his plan is to redecorate accordingly. Neon beer signs, sawdust on the floor, the whole 9 yards. Frizzell recorded it at a Nashville studio with a production style that kept the humor right up front without overselling the joke. The vocal performance walked the perfect line between deadpan and delighted. Country radio, which was in the midst of embracing a rougher, more traditional sound, after years of pop crossover dominance, took to it immediately. The song hit number 1 on the Billboard country charts in the spring of 1982. It was his only solo number 1. Follow-up singles charted but never approached the same heights. Frizzell continued performing and recording with genuine dedication, but the solo spotlight found him only that once. It is, by any measure, one of the funniest country records ever made. Some songs don't need a sequel. Number 9, Sylvia, Nobody, 1982. Soft and slow and utterly irresistible. That is the only way to describe this one. Sylvia Kirby had come to Nashville from Indiana in the late 70s, working as a receptionist at RCA Records before anyone took notice of her as a singer. Getting a record deal required patience and persistence. When it finally came, the early singles showed promise but didn't break through. Then came Nobody. Written by Kai Fleming and Dennis Morgan, two of the most dependable songwriting partnerships in early 80s Nashville, the song was a simple, devastating statement of romantic certainty. The kind of song that sounds obvious in hindsight, but that nobody else thought to record. Sylvia recorded it at RCA's Nashville studio with producer Tom Collins, who kept the arrangement warm and uncluttered. Her vocal was clear and unforced, the kind of delivery that makes a song feel effortless, even when it isn't. The production wrapped around her voice rather than competing with it. Nobody entered the country charts and made its way steadily to the top, reaching number 1 in the spring of 1982. It crossed over and performed strongly on the adult contemporary charts as well, bringing Sylvia a level of mainstream attention that felt like it might be the beginning of something long and successful. It wasn't quite. She released more music through the mid-80s with reasonable chart results, but nothing that matched the reach or emotional impact of Nobody. By the end of the decade, she had largely stepped away from recording. Nobody still shows up on country love song compilations decades later. That is the quiet measure of just how much it got right. Number 8, Pirates of the Mississippi, Feed Jake, 1991. This was the kind of song that stopped whatever you were doing the first time you heard it. The Pirates of the Mississippi were a southern-leaning country band out of Nashville who had been building a following with energetic honky-tonk material when they recorded something that was nothing like anything else in their catalog. Feed Jake was a meditation on mortality and loyalty, narrated by a man who was reckoning with his own life and making sure his old dog was taken care of when he was gone. It sounds simple. It was devastating. Written by band member Bill LaBounty and Danny Mayo, the song took the kind of emotional territory that country music had always claimed and delivered it with a directness that felt almost startlingly unguarded. The production, handled at a Nashville studio, was spare and unhurried. Nothing called attention to itself. Every element served the lyric. When Feed Jake hit country radio in 1991, it connected in a way that the band's more straightforward material hadn't. It climbed into the top 5, earned significant airplay, and generated the kind of listener response that program directors talk about years later. Real letters, real phone calls. The song had hit people somewhere personal. The follow-up singles failed to generate the same connection. The band continued recording and touring, but the door that Feed Jake had opened didn't lead where everyone hoped. They split up in the mid-90s. A few members continued performing in various configurations. Feed Jake still gets played at funerals. That is the truest measure of how deeply it landed. Number 7. Doug Supernaw. I Don't Call Him Daddy, 1993.
It was 6 in the morning when I made the county.
It didn't pull punches, it didn't soften the edges, and country radio, in one of its best moments, rewarded it for that. Doug Supernaw was a Texas honky-tonk singer who had been knocking on Nashville's door for years, playing the clubs, cutting demos, trying to get someone to listen. He had a rawness about him that the increasingly polished Nashville sound of the early 90s wasn't sure what to do with. Then he signed with BNA Records and recorded an album that felt genuinely uncompromised. I Don't Call Him Daddy was the song that opened everything up. Written by Don Sampson, it told the story from a child's perspective. Watching a mother's new relationship unfold and holding on to loyalty for an absent father. The emotional complexity of the lyric was handled without manipulation. It trusted the listener. It trusted Supernaw to deliver it straight.
Know how far I've got to go these days to make ends meet.
Recorded in Nashville with producer Josh Leo, the track was built around Supernaw's deeply natural vocal and a production style that recalled the Texas Roadhouse tradition as much as the Nashville mainstream. It reached number 1 on the Billboard country charts in the spring of 1993. Supernaw followed it with Reno, another strong single that reached the top 10, giving him a brief but real run of commercial momentum. But the momentum faded faster than anyone expected. By the mid-90s, his label had moved on. He continued playing live with dedication and passion, remaining a beloved figure in Texas music circles. He passed away in early 2023, and the tributes that poured in from across the country music world confirmed what his fans had always known. He was the real thing. Number 6. Boy Howdy, She'd Give Anything. 1993.
Someone who could turn her life.
Country music in the early 90s had a thing for bands with big harmonies and California sunshine baked into the production. Boy Howdy fit that description almost perfectly, and on this one song, they made it feel completely genuine. The group formed in Los Angeles, an unusual origin point for a country act, and built their sound around tight vocal blending and a roots-leaning sensibility that owed as much to the Eagles as to traditional Nashville. They had been working toward a break for years when She'd Give Anything finally delivered one. Written by Larry Boone and Paul Nelson, the song had a bittersweet quality that set it apart from the more celebratory end of the 90s country boom. It told the story of a woman watching her life from a distance, longing for something she couldn't quite name. The harmonies carried the emotion without overselling it. The production, done in Nashville, was clean and radio-friendly without sacrificing the song's depth. She'd Give Anything reached the top 5 on the country charts in 1993 and generated the kind of buzz that should have built into a sustained run. The follow-up singles charted with declining results. The label relationship grew complicated. By the mid-90s, the momentum was gone. Lead vocalist Jeffrey Steele went on to become one of the most successful songwriters in Nashville, writing hits for a remarkable range of artists. But Boy Howdy as a band never found another She'd Give Anything. Some groups are defined by a single perfect moment of everything clicking at once. This was theirs.
Here's the tall cloud.
Number 5. Ricochet, Daddy's Money. 1996.
Concentrate on the preacher, preaching my attention span.
The mid-90s were peak boom years for country music, and the radio was full of big hat, big hook energy. Ricochet fit right into that world, and then couldn't quite find the exit before the genre moved on without them. The group was a 5-piece band from Georgia who had paid extensive dues on the honky-tonk circuit before landing a deal with Columbia Records in Nashville. They could play hard, and they could harmonize. And Daddy's Money showed off both qualities simultaneously. The song was a playful, full-throttle piece of storytelling about a woman with a rich father and a taste for the finer things in life. It had the kind of swagger that made it instantly accessible on radio, the kind of hook that felt like it had always existed. Recorded in Nashville with a production that leaned heavily into the era's love of big drums and stacked guitars, it burst out of speakers with an energy that felt genuinely live.
Her second cousin was my third grade teacher.
Daddy's Money climbed to number 1 in the spring of 1996, and suddenly Ricochet were one of the most talked about new acts in country music. They had the look, the sound, and the timing. Everything appeared to be in place. The follow-up singles charted, they toured relentlessly. But the magic of that first song proved difficult to replicate, and the audience that had arrived quickly found other things to move on to just as quickly. By the late 90s, the band had dissolved. Daddy's Money still sounds like a great Saturday night. That quality hasn't aged a day. Number 4, Lila McCann, I Wanna Fall in Love, Fuss 1997.
Look at me now.
She was 13 years old when she recorded this. Let that settle for a moment. Lila McCann was discovered performing at a festival in Washington State, where a producer caught her set and immediately recognized something unusual. A voice with clarity, warmth, and maturity that had no business coming from someone that young. She signed with Asylum Records and went to Nashville to record. I Wanna Fall in Love was the song that introduced her to country radio in 1997. Written by Tim Nichols and Craig Wiseman, it was a bright, earnest piece about romantic longing, the specific ache of wanting to experience something you haven't yet. In McCann's hands, that theme was entirely credible. She wasn't performing an emotion. She was living close enough to it that the distance barely existed. The production was handled with care, keeping the arrangement from overwhelming a young voice. McCann's vocal was forward in the mix and allowed to breathe. The result was something that felt genuinely fresh on country radio, which by 1997 had become crowded with artists chasing the same commercial template. The single reached the top 5, and McCann became one of the youngest artists in history to have a top 5 country hit. She released more music through the turn of the century with moderate chart success, but the career arc that I Wanna Fall in Love seemed to promise never fully materialized. The industry moves fast, and youth is a window that closes quickly. McCann has continued performing over the years, building a loyal following that remembers exactly where they were the first time that song came on. Number 3, Jamie O'Neal, There Is No Arizona, 2000.
A new and better life. I've never.
By the time this song came out, the late 90s country boom had started to cool. Radio was becoming more cautious. Breakthrough moments for new artists were harder to come by, which makes it all the more remarkable that There Is No Arizona hit as hard as it did. Jamie O'Neal was an Australian-born singer who had been in Nashville for years, writing songs and recording demos, grinding through the process that breaks more people than it rewards. Mercury Nashville eventually gave her a shot, and the first song they released was this one. Written by Sammi Smith, the song was built around a deception. A man who had painted such vivid pictures of his life and his home in Arizona that a woman had fallen in love with the idea of them, only to discover none of it was real. The emotional payoff was in what that realization costs. It was mature, specific, and slightly unusual in its subject matter, which was exactly why it worked. O'Neal recorded it at a Nashville studio with a vocal performance that was anything but tentative. She had waited too long for this to hold anything back. The production was contemporary but unhurried, giving her room to move through the lyric with control and conviction. The song climbed to number 1 in early 2001, making O'Neal one of the most immediately discussed new voices in country music. She followed it with When I Think About Angels, which also reached number 1, giving her a genuine run of momentum. But the subsequent album struggled to maintain that level, and by the mid-2000s, her commercial presence had faded. There Is No Arizona remains one of the best country singles of the transitional moment. Clean, sharp, and built entirely around a story worth telling. Number 2, Terri Gibbs, Somebody's Knockin', 1981.
Somebody's knocking, sure I let him in.
Blind from birth, raised in Augusta, Georgia, playing piano in church before she could read, Terri Gibbs came to Nashville as a fully formed artist who already knew exactly who she was. The industry took a while to figure out what to do with her. Somebody's Knockin' was a song that could have come from any decade. It had a smoky, bluesy undercurrent running beneath the country production, and a narrative, a woman being tempted by a man she suspects might be the devil himself. That was genuinely unusual for mainstream country radio in 1981. It was a little gothic, a little dangerous, and entirely unforgettable. Recorded at a Nashville studio with producer Ed Penny, the track let Gibbs's piano work stand alongside her vocal as a co-equal presence. Her voice had a husky, intimate quality that felt like late night and private confession all at once. The production gave it space without stripping out the atmosphere. The song climbed to number 8 on the country charts and crossed over to reach the top 15 on the pop charts. Gibbs was nominated for a Grammy for Best New Artist and won the Country Music Association Award for New Female Vocalist of the Year. For a moment, it seemed like she was about to become one of the defining voices of the decade. The follow-up releases found modest country chart success, but nothing that reached the pop crossover territory of Somebody's Knockin'. Her label released several more albums through the mid-80s, but the mainstream window had closed almost as quickly as it had opened. She returned to performing gospel music and continued playing in smaller venues, never abandoning the music, just letting go of the particular ambition that hits like this one briefly makes possible. Somebody's Knockin' is one of those songs that reminds you what real individuality sounds like in the middle of a field full of similarly dressed voices. Number 1, Cal Smith, Country Bumpkin, 1974.
He walked into the bar and parked his lanky frame.
Some songs don't just hit the charts. They tell you something true about being alive, and you carry that truth around for the rest of your life without quite knowing where you picked it up. Cal Smith had been a working musician for over a decade before this moment arrived. He'd toured as a guitarist in Ernest Tubb's Texas Troubadours, paying dues on the road in the most demanding school country music had to offer. He'd recorded for Decca and placed modest singles on the lower rungs of the country charts. He was respected among musicians, comfortable on stage, and almost entirely unknown to the broader public. Nashville had plenty of men like him, talented, seasoned, perpetually one song away from something bigger. That song turned out to be Country Bumpkin, written by Don Wayne, who had already demonstrated he understood something deep about the way ordinary lives accumulate meaning. Wayne handed Smith a lyric that moved through time like a slow river, beginning in a bar where a young country boy meets a city girl who finds him hopelessly out of place, then jumping forward through decades of marriage, children, and finally an old man at the end of his life, asking his wife to hold his hand one more time. It was a complete human story, compressed into 3 minutes and change, and it never once reached for sentiment it hadn't earned.
I'll just have a glass of anything.
Smith recorded it at a Nashville studio in 1973, working with producer Walter Haynes. The production was gentle and unadorned in the way that the best story songs always are. Nothing competing for attention, everything in service of the narrative. Smith's vocal was unhurried and plain-spoken, the kind of delivery that sounds effortless and costs everything. He wasn't interpreting the lyrics so much as inhabiting it, moving through each chapter of that life with the quiet authority of someone who had spent 30 years listening to real people in real rooms. When Country Bumpkin reached country radio in early 1974, it climbed steadily and without drama to number 1, where it stayed for 3 weeks. At the end of that year, the Country Music Association named it Song of the Year. For a few months, Cal Smith was the most celebrated name in Nashville. Then the follow-ups came, and the momentum that had carried Country Bumpkin didn't transfer. Subsequent singles charted modestly, and then not at all. Smith continued recording and touring with the same professionalism he had always brought to the work, but the mainstream spotlight had moved on. By the end of the decade, he was largely back where he had started, respected, road-worn, and invisible to the casual fan. What makes Country Bumpkin the number 1 entry on this list is what it asks of the person listening. It doesn't offer a hook designed to lodge in your brain, or a production trick engineered to catch your ear. It simply tells you a story about a life, beginning to end, and trusts you to recognize something of yourself, or someone you loved in the telling. That kind of trust is rare in any genre, and rarer still when it actually works. 50 years on, the last verse still lands like a quiet weight, placed carefully in the center of the chest. The kind you don't put down when the song ends. That's our 15. 15 songs that arrived without warning, owned the airwaves for a season, and then disappeared back into wherever one-hit wonders go when the spotlight moves on. If one of these brought a memory back, a first drive with the radio up, a kitchen in a house you don't live in anymore, a summer you didn't know you were still carrying, we genuinely love to hear about it in the comments. And if there's a country one-hit wonder we missed that you think deserves its moment back, tell us. We'll be listening.